I left my husband with our 1-year-old twins and walked out. That's the kind of sentence people love to repeat like a scandalous headline. She just packed a bag and left him with 2 babies. When they say it, they tilt their heads in this half-curious, half-judgmental way, waiting to see if I'll crumble or start defending myself. I usually just shrug, let them think what they want. They weren't there at 3 in the morning when my life cracked open. They didn't read the messages on his secret phone. They didn't live in my body when it was falling apart. It's easy to judge from the sidelines when your own house isn't on fire. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 32, I live in a small apartment on the other side of town, and on paper I look like the worst kind of cliché. Divorced, paying child support, seeing my kids on weekends, building a career I should have started years ago. My ex, Nicholas James Carter, still lives in the house we bought together, the one with the 2 big mortgage and the swing set in the yard. Our boys, Lucas and Liam, officially live with him. When people at work talk about their kids' bedtime routines and school drop-offs, I nod and smile and don't mention that I'm a Sunday mom. I show up on Saturdays with snacks and toy dinosaurs, and on Sunday nights I hand my children back to the man who once planned his future like a heist, with me and the boys as pieces on his board. If you want to understand how I got here, you have to start long before Nick, before the twins, before the court papers. You have to start in a cramped duplex where the washing machine never stopped and the TV was always too loud. My mom had 4 kids and very little help. I was the oldest, the automatic assistant, the extra pair of hands no one asked if I wanted to be. My brothers remember a childhood of cartoons and hand-me-down bikes. I remember formula stains on the couch and trying to do homework with a crying baby on my shoulder. Mom worked whenever she could, cleaning houses, stocking shelves, taking night shifts at a nursing home. My dad floated in and out, always between jobs or on a job somewhere else, depending on what story he felt like telling that week. He loved us in his own unreliable way, but he was more like a guest star than a regular character in our lives. By 10, I could change a diaper half asleep, take a temperature, heat up canned soup, and rock a toddler back to sleep after a nightmare. I knew which brother liked his socks inside out, which one was terrified of thunder, which lullaby worked best when. I did not know what it felt like to come home to a hot meal someone else cooked for me, or to fall asleep without listening for a baby's cry. Other girls at school talked about crushes and dances and which shade of lipstick they were going to sneak past their moms. I counted how many diapers we had left and whether we could stretch them to payday. I was not a child, I was an unpaid intern in motherhood. Somewhere around senior year, I made a quiet, fierce promise to myself. No children until at least 30, maybe never. I wrote it in the back of a notebook and circled it 3 times. It wasn't a dramatic teenage declaration, it was a survival rule, like don't touch the hot stove. I had already lived the baby years for someone else. If I ever had a life of my own, it would not be swallowed whole by bottles and sleepless nights and everybody else's needs. Then I met Nick. We worked together in this high-volume campus cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and panic. On his first days, he dropped a tray, mixed up 3 drinks, and somehow managed to spill an entire caramel latte on a girl's white sweater. He stood there mortified, apologizing, trying to dab it off with napkins, while she glared at him like he'd ruined her entire semester. I couldn't help it. I laughed. He looked up, caught my eye, and laughed too, this easy, self-deprecating laugh that said, yeah, I'm a disaster, but at least I know it. Something in my chest loosened. Nick was different from the man I'd grown up around. He had a plan, a real one. He wanted to work his way up in construction management, save money, maybe start his own firm one day. He listened when I talked, asked about my classes, remembered my brothers' names. He never acted like my messy background was something to be embarrassed about. He thought it made me tough and resourceful. His words, not mine. Being with him felt like stepping out of a cramped, noisy room into fresh air. A few months into dating, we walked home after a late shift, paper cups of leftover coffee cooling in our hands. The street was quiet, leaves scraping along the sidewalk. It seemed like the right time. I have something you should know, I said. I don't want kids, at least not before 30. Honestly, maybe not ever. I basically raised my brothers. I'm tired. He didn't flinch, didn't try to argue me out of it. He just slung his arm over my shoulders. I barely know where my car is parked right now. I'm not thinking about kids. And even if we get serious, I'm not going to bully you into being a mom if you don't want to. That's not who I am. I believed him. I let myself relax. We moved in together a year later, sharing a tiny apartment with squeaky floors and mismatched furniture, and somehow it felt like the safest place in the world. We married 2 years after that. Nothing fancy, a simple ceremony in a park, some folding chairs, a rented arch, a white dress bought on sale. My family looked a little lost among his relatives with their coordinated outfits and rehearsed toasts. But for a few hours, everything felt soft and bright and possible. I remember thinking, maybe I really did escape. Maybe this is what normal looks like. The first years of our marriage were, there's no other word, good. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. We worked, we cooked questionable dinners together, we watched shows until way too late, we cuddled on the couch on Sundays and called it church. When nosy coworkers or relatives asked about kids, I'd joke that I already had a big kid at home. Nick would chuckle, throw an arm around me, and say, "We're busy building careers, everyone chill." I loved him for that. I loved that he didn't let anyone frame me as selfish just because I knew what I could and couldn't handle. I'd roll my eyes and change the subject, but his remarks kept coming, less like jokes and more like hints. He started talking about his friends' kids, how seeing them made him think, how his parents kept dropping not-so-subtle remarks about grandkids. One night, we were eating takeout on the couch when he muted the TV during some commercial with a perfect smiling family. "Emma," he said, "I want a child, I really do. I didn't think I'd feel it this strongly, but I do." The words landed like stones in my stomach. "We talked about this," I reminded him. "I told you all of this before we got married. I am not sure I can go through that. I'm not sure I want to." "I know," he said, rubbing his forehead. "Back then it felt hypothetical. We were so young. 30 sounded ancient and far away. But it's not hypothetical anymore. I'm 33. I want a family for real." "So what have we been for the last 8 years?" The question slipped out sharper than I meant. He hesitated. "Of course we're a family. I don't know. I always pictured myself being a dad, teaching my kid to ride a bike, showing them the world. It's like this ache now." I started to feel like a villain in my own marriage. Every time I said no, the air between us got a little heavier. He wasn't cruel, he didn't yell, didn't insult me, but the pressure was constant, like a hand on my back pushing. He read studies about women waiting too long, about fertility dropping after 30. He showed me articles about overcoming childhood trauma through parenting, as if having a baby could magically heal what I'd lived through. Meanwhile, his friends were posting photos of chubby babies and first steps. His mom nearly cried once at dinner, saying, "I just want to hold a grandchild before I die." I shot Nick a look across the table, and he mouthed, "Sorry," but the damage was done. The thing is, doubt can be louder than certainty if you hear it often enough. One morning, on the train, I watched a woman about my age holding a sleeping baby, his cheeks squished against her collarbone. She looked tired, sure, but also steady. There was a softness in her face I didn't recognize in my own reflection. I stared at them and thought, what if I'm running from something that could actually be good just because I'm scared? That night, while Nick was scrolling through his phone, I said very quietly, "What if we tried?" His head snapped up. "What?" "I'm not promising anything. I'm not scheduling ovulation or whatever, but we could stop using protection and see what happens. If it doesn't happen, we accept that. If it does, we'll deal with it." For a second, he just stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then he launched himself across the couch and hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. He kept saying, "You won't regret it, I swear. I'll be there every step." I wanted to believe him. I decided to believe him. The universe has a dark sense of humor. It took almost no time at all. 2 missed periods and a plastic stick later, I was staring at 2 bright pink lines. My hands shook so badly I had to sit on the edge of the bathtub. Nick was ecstatic. He danced me around the living room, called his parents, texted his friends. I smiled and laughed and watched myself from somewhere far away, like a stand-in actress playing joyful pregnant wife. Inside, my old promise to myself was screaming. The pregnancy was rough from the start.
Constant nausea, bone-deep exhaustion, sharp pain in my back that no pillow could fix. At our first big ultrasound, the doctor frowned at the screen, moved the probe, frowned again. I gripped the edge of the table, sure something was horribly wrong. Then she smiled. "Well," she said, "I hope you like surprises. You're having twins." Nick's face lit up like a Christmas tree. He called them the boys from that day on, even before we knew their sex. I laughed weakly and tried not to throw up on the exam table. That night, alone in our bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, of course it had to be two." The months that followed blur together in my memory. Doctor's visits, swelling ankles, weird cravings I was too tired to satisfy. Nick was supportive in the surface-level ways. He took turns with night feedings, rocked the boys when he wasn't traveling, changed diapers without complaining. But his career was taking off. He traveled more, stayed late at the office. He kept talking about big projects, about going overseas for negotiations. I felt like he was moving forward while I was increasingly stuck in one fragile, uncomfortable body. Lucas and Liam were born by scheduled C-section at 38 weeks. They came out loud and healthy, two squirmy bundles with identical angry cries. I remember the pressure on my ribs, the bright lights, the tugging sensation as if someone were rummaging inside me. People talk about a rush of love when they first see their babies. I felt relief that they were breathing, and then a rising tide of panic that I was now responsible for two whole humans I didn't yet know how to love. Recovery was brutal. My back felt like it was breaking. Every movement pulled on the incision. I could barely get out of bed, let alone pick up a baby without gritting my teeth. The nights blurred into an endless loop. Feed one, burp him, change him, try to sleep before the other woke up. I'd wake to both of them crying at once, my body heavy as stone. Lucas was the calmer twin, but when Liam screamed long enough, Lucas joined in out of solidarity or annoyance, I never figured out which. The sound of two babies crying at once should be classified as a form of torture. The mythical maternal instinct didn't sweep in and save me. I felt clumsy, unsure, deeply alone. My milk came in late and never really stabilized. Feeding hurt. I cried through it more than once. After a severe bout of mastitis, the doctor recommended transitioning to formula. I nodded, numb, feeling like I'd already failed at the first big test. At first, Nick tried. He really did. He took turns with night feedings, rocked the boys when he wasn't traveling, changed diapers without complaining, but his exhaustion changed people. His company landed a massive contract that required constant attention. He started saying things like, "I can't stay up, I have to be sharp tomorrow," and disappearing into the guest room with earplugs. The nights became mine alone. The days weren't much better. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror. I was a collection of aches and dark circles, living in sweatpants spattered with spit up. Regular showers felt like a luxury vacation. Whenever Nick came home to see dishes piled up and laundry overflowing, he'd sigh in that particular way that said more than words. The conversation about hiring help almost finished us. I had been Googling local babysitters, just a few hours a week, enough for me to shower, sleep, maybe do physical therapy for my back. One evening, while he was checking emails at the kitchen table, I said, "I think we need a nanny, part-time. I can't do this alone anymore." He didn't look up. "Do you know how much that costs?" "Yes, I checked. We can afford a few hours a week." He pushed his laptop away. "We're already bleeding money. Diapers, formula because you couldn't breastfeed, hospital bills, the mortgage, and now you want a nanny? For what? So you can have spa days?" "I want to pee without someone screaming. I want to stand up without feeling like my spine is shattering. I want to not wish I was dead at 3 a.m. That's what I want." His face hardened. "Other women manage without help." "Other women aren't me," I said, but my voice shook. That night, after he slammed the door and left to clear his head, both boys woke up and cried so hard they were gagging. I sat on the nursery floor, one baby on each shoulder, tears running down my face, thinking, I made a terrible mistake. Not just the twins,
The whole thing. The marriage, the house, the pretending I could be someone I'm not. Eventually, I hired a babysitter anyway, using what was left of my maternity pay. Her name was Olivia, a college student who adored kids and didn't flinch at noise or mess. She came 3 afternoons a week. Those hours saved my sanity. Sometimes I used them to sleep. Sometimes I went for a walk alone, just to remember how silence felt. Sometimes I sat in my car and cried until there were no tears left. With Olivia's help, the edges of my life stopped feeling so razor sharp. I started to enjoy the boys in small flashes. The way Lucas furrowed his brow when he concentrated on a toy. The way Liam's whole face lit up when he finally managed a belly laugh instead of a shriek. Nick and I were still distant, but I thought, maybe we're turning a corner. Maybe when the twins are older and I go back to work, we'll find each other again. Then the phone call came. It was a gray, rainy afternoon. Olivia had just left, Nick was on yet another business trip, and I was in the kitchen bouncing Liam on my hip while Lucas chewed on a spoon in his high chair. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I ignore those, but something made me swipe to answer. Hello? Is this Emma Carter? The voice on the other end was a woman's, calm, with a faint foreign lilt. Yes. Who's this? My name is Lila, she said. I'm calling about your husband. A familiar cold knot formed in my stomach. Is he all right? He's fine physically, she said. Morally is another matter. There was a pause, then she continued in that same controlled tone. My younger sister has been seeing your husband for several months. They're in Istanbul. I thought you should know. For a few seconds, I literally didn't understand the words. They came through the speaker but didn't make sense. I think you have the wrong person, I managed. My husband travels for work, but he's not seeing anyone. I wish that were true, Lila replied. My sister Haley is 19. She's shy, not very experienced with men. Our father is a major investor. He works with your company's husband. At first, we believed Nick was just being kind. Then we started reading the messages he sends her, the promises, the things he says about you. I slid down the wall and sat on the kitchen floor, still holding Liam. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. What does he say? I whispered. That he is unhappy in his marriage, that he is trapped with a woman who doesn't understand him, that you only had children to keep him from leaving. Her voice tightened for the first time. He also talks about how marrying my sister would help him join our family business. Those parts are less romantic. I wanted to tell her she was lying. I wanted to laugh and hang up. Instead, I said, I don't believe you. I understand, she said. I wouldn't either in your place. Do you know if he has a second phone? The question stunned me. No. He does, Lila said. He hides it when he visits us. I saw the lock screen once. The passcode is your mother-in-law's birthday. If you find the phone, you'll see everything. She recited 6 numbers. They landed in my ear like gunshots. I knew that date by heart. Nick's mom mentioned it every time we forgot to call. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Lila added softly. I'm trying to protect my sister. She doesn't believe me when I warn her. She says Nick will leave you and marry her. She thinks it's love. But when I read his messages with his colleague, Mike, I think, I saw how they talk about her. About you. It's all strategy to them. In the background, one of the twins started fussing. I clutched the phone tighter. Send me screenshots, I said. I can't, she answered. I promised not to invade my sister's privacy more than I already have. This is already a betrayal. But if you look at his second phone, you won't need my screenshots. You'll have your own. She asked me to call back after I checked. Then she hung up, leaving me on the cold kitchen tiles with a baby on my lap and a roaring in my ears. For the rest of the day, I moved on autopilot, feeding the boys, changing diapers, stacking blocks.
Part of me wanted to text Nick right away, demand to know the truth. Another part thought, if this is some twisted prank, do I really want to blow up my life over it? By evening, I had resolved to do nothing until he came home. I would find the phone. If there was no phone, no secret, I could chalk it up to a weird wrong number. If there was, well. Nick came back the next night, dragging his suitcase and laptop bag, smelling like airport coffee. He kissed me on the cheek without really looking, said, "God, I'm exhausted," and headed straight for the shower. He didn't even peek into the nursery to see the boys. "Can you keep them quiet?" he called from the hallway. "My head is killing me." "Sure," I said, my voice flat. When the house finally went quiet, babies asleep, water off, Nick snoring in our bed, I started searching. His suitcase held only shirts and socks. His carry-on bag had a book, chargers, receipts. No extra phone. My heart thudded harder. I checked coat pockets, drawers, shelves. Nothing. Then I thought of the car. I pulled on a hoodie, grabbed his keys, and slipped outside. The night air was chilly against my sweat-damp skin. In the car, I opened the glove compartment. Papers, an old granola bar, a tangle of cables. I was about to slam it shut when my fingers brushed smooth plastic. A slim, black smartphone lay tucked under a stack of maps we never used. For a moment, I just stared at it, unable to breathe. Then I stuffed it into my pocket, locked the car, and hurried back inside, praying the boys wouldn't wake up before I knew what I was dealing with. At the kitchen table, under the weak light of the stove hood, I set the phone down. Liam coughed once from the nursery and went quiet again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the passcode. 6 digits, his mother's birthday. The screen unlocked. There were almost no apps, just a messaging app and email. 2 chats were pinned at the top. One labeled H, one labeled M. My stomach flipped. I opened the conversation with H first. The messages read like the script of a melodramatic romance, full of overblown declarations and faux poetic lines. He called her my angel, my little star, the only real thing in my life. He told her he couldn't stand coming home to me, that our marriage had turned into a business arrangement, that I used the twins to manipulate him. He said he was trapped in a house with a woman who never wanted children, but had them anyway just to keep him from being free. I felt like I was reading about a stranger. In his story, I was cold, selfish, calculating. He conveniently left out the part where he had begged me for those children. Between the declarations, there were logistical conversations. He promised that once things settled down, once the twins turned 1 and he'd proven himself as a devoted father in court, he would finally end this dead marriage and marry her. He spun her fantasies of a house by the sea, of summers in Turkey, of combining business and love into one shining future. I closed the chat when the letters started swimming. It was horrible, but it was still couched in the language of romance. Part of me tried to cling to that. He really did love her, so maybe he had just fallen. People make mistakes. Then I opened the chat with M. Mike was his colleague, a guy I'd met once or twice at company parties. Loud, friendly, forgettable. In these messages, he sounded like a completely different person. Together, he and Nick dissected the whole situation like a deal. They talked numbers and opportunities. They discussed Haley and Layla's father, his net worth, his influence in the industry, the projects he could steer their way. "Keep the girl hooked," Mike wrote in one message. "She's naive. She'll believe whatever you tell her. Marrying into that family sets you up for life." "What about Emma?" Nick asked. "She's useful for now," Mike replied. "Courts love the devoted dad angle. Play it right, get primary custody, it'll look like you're the stable one. 1 year, maybe 2, then divorce. By then, you'll be too valuable for Haley's dad to be mad for long." They called me dead weight and the baggage with twins. They called Haley a sweet little ticket into the big leagues. There was not a single line about love. It was all strategy and timing. something inside me went very, very still. I closed the app, set the phone down, and listened. The house hummed quietly, the fridge, the clock, the faint noise of traffic outside. Nick snored in our bed, the babies slept in their cribs, blissfully unaware that their father was planning to trade all of us in for a better contract. I wish I could say I cried, or screamed, or threw things. I didn't. Instead, a strange calm spread through me, like cold water over a burn. For the first time in months, maybe years, my next steps seemed clear. I put the phone in my pocket, went to the bedroom, and looked at Nick. His face was relaxed in sleep, the furrow that had appeared in the last year smoothed out. I remembered loving that face. I remembered believing he was my safe place. Softly, so I wouldn't wake him, I said, "Well played." Then I packed. Not everything, just enough. A suitcase with clothes for a few days, my important documents, some cash I'd stashed away for emergencies. I tiptoed into the nursery and stood between the cribs, watching the boys breathe. Lucas's eyelashes fluttered in a dream. Liam's mouth popped open and closed, searching for a pacifier. I didn't pick them up. If I had, I'm not sure I would have been able to leave. Instead, I leaned over, kissed their foreheads, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm going to fix this for you. I don't know how yet, but I will." In the kitchen, I tore a page from a notepad and wrote, with hands that only shook a little, "I know about everything. The phone is gone. I'm leaving. The boys are with you, like you always wanted. Emma." I left the note on the table where he couldn't miss it. I ordered a cab on my own phone, grabbed Nick's secret phone, and walked out of the house into the dark. The next few days moved as fast as a movie montage, and yet felt excruciatingly slow. I checked into a cheap motel and called Layla. When I told her what I'd found, her silence on the other end of the line felt heavier than any words. I offered to send her screenshots. She didn't even need them. From there, everything snowballed. Layla told her parents. Her father, furious that someone had tried to manipulate his daughter and his business at the same time, pulled every professional lever he had. Contracts were canceled, projects were reassigned. Within a month, Nick and Mike were quietly pushed out of the company and effectively blacklisted in that niche of the industry.
Layla and Haley's family hired lawyers. They contacted me, apologized for what had happened, said they wanted to make sure I and the twins didn't suffer more than we already had. There were long meetings and documents filled with words I barely understood. In the end, they transferred me a large settlement for emotional and reputational damage. I thought about refusing on principle, then remembered I had to figure out housing, medical bills, therapy, and a future for two little boys who hadn't asked for any of this. I signed. Nick found me before the dust settled. He showed up at the motel, eyes red, hair a mess, that secret phone nowhere in sight. "How could you leave the boys?" was the first thing he said. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I screwed up." "Because you were already planning to," I answered. "Only in your version, you got to look like the hero." He tried to explain. He said it had gotten out of hand, that he'd been confused, that Mike had egged him on. He insisted he really loved Haley at first, but realized it was just escapism, that I was the one he truly loved, that none of it meant what it looked like. I listened, arms crossed, feeling nothing but a cold, distant curiosity, like I was watching someone audition for a role. "Emma, we can work through this," he pleaded. "Think of the boys. We're a family. Don't throw everything away over a mistake." "You didn't trip and fall into a months-long affair," I said. "You didn't accidentally plan custody strategies and career moves with your buddy. That's not a mistake. That's a project." In the end, I made a decision that still shocks people when they hear it. I told him I'd file for divorce and give up the house, the car, our savings, everything in favor of the twins. I wouldn't fight for primary custody. I didn't trust myself not to fall apart if I had to be their only full-time parent right then. I was too broken, too exhausted, too angry.
I was afraid that staying in that house, in that marriage, would turn me into the kind of mother who resents her own children just for existing. When we went to court, the judge looked at me like I was an alien. "You understand what you're asking for," she said. "Most mothers fight to keep their children with them." "I know," I said. "I'm not most mothers. They deserve stability. Right now, he can give that better than I can. I want them to have the house, their rooms, their routines. I'll support them financially and be there as much as I can, but I can't pretend I'm capable of more than that. Not yet." And just like that, it was done. The marriage that had once felt like my escape hatch was officially over. Nick got the house and primary custody. I got my freedom and more guilt than I knew what to do with. The first months alone were a strange mix of relief and grief. I rented a small studio across town, bought secondhand furniture, and stared at the blank walls, wondering who I was if I wasn't Nick's wife or the twins' full-time mom. I went back to therapy. I went back to work, taking a job at a marketing agency that had once tried to recruit me before everything went sideways. I was rusty, insecure, constantly worried I'd make a mistake, but slowly my brain woke up from the fog. On weekends, I took the bus back to the neighborhood I'd left. I'd stand at the door, heart hammering, waiting for the boys to burst out. Lucas was cautious at first, looking up at me as if checking I was real. Liam barreled into my legs with his usual intensity. We went to parks, to the library, to the little diner that had balloons and crayons. I changed diapers in public bathrooms, wiped applesauce off their cheeks, kissed bruised knees, and then, on Sunday evenings, I buckled them back into Nick's car and watched them drive away. Sometimes I cried all the way home. Sometimes I didn't. Something unexpected happened over those visits. I fell in love with my children. Not with the idea of motherhood, not with some Instagram version of it, but with them, these specific, complicated little humans. I loved Lucas's deep concentration, the way he lined up his toy cars by color. I loved Liam's wild laugh, the way he threw his arms around my neck and squeezed like he never wanted to let go. Being with them in bursts rather than drowning in their needs 24/7 allowed me to see them as more than constant demands. I could be present, patient, even playful. The guilt that I wasn't there all week never disappeared, but it stopped being the only thing I felt. Nick changed too. Losing his job and his shiny future plans knocked the arrogance right out of him. He took a position at a smaller, less glamorous company. He learned to do bedtime alone, to handle tantrums and daycare pickups and stomach flu without a wife to blame. He stopped talking big and started listening more. Every few months, he would try gently to bring up the idea of us trying again. "We're not the same people," he'd say. "I know I messed up, more than messed up, but I'm different now. You're different. The boys would be so happy if we were under one roof." Maybe some women could do it. Maybe some people can draw a line under that betrayal that deep and say, "That was then, this is now," and move forward. I'm not one of them. I can be polite, I can be cooperative, I can acknowledge that he's trying, but I can't unknow what he was capable of when no one was watching. I can't unsee the words "dead weight" next to my name. These days, my life is quieter. I manage a small team at the agency now. I pay my bills on time. I have plants that mostly stay alive. On the weeks I don't have the boys, sometimes I go out with friends or just sit on my couch with a book, enjoying the fact that no one is screaming for me. On the weeks I do have them, my apartment transforms into a battlefield of blocks and stuffed animals, and my heart beats in 3 bodies instead of 1. I still hear the whisper sometimes, relatives who say I abandoned my children, acquaintances who insist a real mother would have fought harder. I don't correct them. They don't deserve the story. The ones that matter see the way my boys run to me, the way they shout, "Mom, watch!" every 30 seconds, the way they slump against me and fall asleep on my shoulder by the end of a long day. They know the truth, that love isn't measured only by the nights you spend under one roof, but by what you're willing to do to not destroy yourself while trying to be everything to everyone. As for Nick, he is not the villain of my story anymore. Not exactly. He's the father of my children, a man who made choices that shattered our life and then had to grow up very fast when the consequences hit. When we sit together at school events or birthday parties, there's a weary truce between us. Sometimes I even catch glimpses of the boy I fell in love with, under all the guilt and regret. He still asks, now and then, if I think we'll ever be a family again. I always tell him the same thing. We're already a family, just not the kind you wanted. Late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the only sound is the hum of the fridge, I sometimes wonder if I'll ever be able to forgive him completely. Not in the sense of getting back together, I'm almost sure that will never happen, but in the sense of letting go of the last shards of anger that still live in my chest. Some days I think I'm close. On others, a stray memory will hit me, the feel of that secret phone in my hand, the phrases dead weight and ticket into the big leagues, and my jaw tightens all over again. People like clean endings, but life rarely offers them. Right now, I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm still paying for the choices I made and the ones I refused to make. I'm still learning how to be a good mother on my own terms, not on the terms printed in parenting books or whispered by people who've never sat on a nursery floor at 4 in the morning wishing they could vanish. What I know for sure is this. The night I walked out with a suitcase and left my babies sleeping in their cribs, I felt like the worst human being alive. I still carry that moment with me. But if I hadn't left, if I'd stayed and swallowed what I knew, I think some essential part of me would have died. And then my sons would have grown up with a mother who was physically present and emotionally gone. I'm not sure that would have been better. So I live with the mess. I show up every weekend. I work hard. I go to therapy. I hug my boys tight and tell them I love them so often they roll their eyes. I build a life that is mine, not anyone else's plan. And maybe, someday, when they're older and ready to hear it, I'll tell them the whole story. Not to turn them against their father, but to show them that loving someone doesn't mean letting them burn your life to the ground. Until then, I do the only thing I can. I keep going. I keep loving them. I keep choosing myself as well. And I leave the question, whether something like this can ever truly be forgiven, hanging open in the air, unanswered, like a door I'm not ready to close and not ready to walk through.